Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Goodness John and today we're going to be making a lace dress. So this is going to be the lower part of it, the skirt part of it. So first thing, I'm going to take the biggest part of my measurement, that will be my hip, divided by 4, and then fold the fabric based on that measurement. So I have 40 divided by 4, that's 10, plus 2 inches allowance. So this, I've cut out 12 inches. So I'm going to cut out the length because I want to work with just the fabric I'll be needing. So I'll be removing the waist length from the full length to get the length of the skirt part of the dress. My waist length is 18 inches and my full length is 60. So subtracting 18 from that, I have 42 left. So this, what I'm measuring now, is 42 inches plus 2 inches allowance. The 2 inches allowance is what I'm going to be folding it with. So I'll just do this and cut it out so we can start applying our measurement on the skirt, so the skirt. After I've cut this out, I'll iron the fabric just so I have that clear mark. So I'm going to iron the fold and iron the fabric so I can have a neat cut. So the first measurement I'll be applying, first of all, I'm going to take out my waist length measurement. So my waist length is 18, so I'm going to be removing the 17 and a half. So I'm removing the half-inch allowance I'm going to use to join, so it'll be 17 and a half. I'll remove, and then I'll start taking my hip length. My hip length is 25, my knee length is 40, so I'll go 3 inches above 40, which is 37. I'll mark that, and then I'll mark 2 inches below the hip length. This is just to control the curve, so I have a nice curve around the hip. I'll take the same measurement on the other side and then use a ruler to join it. So mind you, I don't need to take the full length measurement because I already cut that out based on the full length measurement. So I'll just join this, and after I've joined it, I'll start to take my measurements, my horizontal measurements. I'll start with my round waist. My round waist is 26, so I'll be dividing that by 4. So my round body measurement, I'll be dividing those by 4 inches. So I'm dividing my round hip by 4 and then adding 2 inches allowance to it. So divided by 4 is 6.5 plus 2 inches, that's 8.5. So I'll just mark that on the fabric. Next I'll apply my hip measurement, which is 40 divided by 4, 10 plus 2 inches. So I'll just mark that on the fabric as well, and I'll mark it on the 2-inch line I marked below the hip line as well. So I'll just take the same measurement on the hip line and on the 2 inches below. So for the knee length, we're going to be subtracting 2 inches from the hip measurement. So I just measured the hip, which is 10. So on the knee length, I'm going to measure 8 inches. That will be my hip length. That will be my around the knee. So it's going to be 8 inches. I've marked down the fabric plus the 2-inch allowance, so it's going to be 10 in total. So, and then for the now for the bottom part, I'm going to subtract 2 inches from the round knee as well. So this is a pencil dress pattern, so I'm going to subtract 2 inches from the round knee. So it is 8. So subtracting 2 from it, that will be 6. So I'm going to transfer 6 to the full length, then add 2 inches allowance as well. So after I've marked all these lines, the next thing I'm going to do is take a ruler and join the knee to the full length, and then the knee to the hip. Then I'll use a ruler to connect the hip and the 2 inches beneath together, and then I'll use a hip curve ruler to connect the waist to the hip length. This is just to give me the shape of the skirts. After I've drawn the shape, I'll take a look at it to ensure that I have a smooth curve. If there's anything not looking right about it, I would use a chalk and straighten that out just so I'm happy with with it and I have a smooth curve. So at the midpoint, the center front, I'm going to go down by half an inch and then go in from the actual waist measurement by 1 inch and then connect that together with a slight curve. Now that I'm happy with the shape, I'm going to cut out the shape, the skirt shape, but I'll be leaving out the center front dip, the slight curve I just measured. I'll cut that out after I have cut out the back pattern. So I'll be using the front pattern to cut out the back pattern. So for the back pattern, I've already folded this fabric together in two. So I've cut it on fold, as you can see. So I'll be placing the front pattern on this fabric. So I folded a fabric big enough to take the back pattern. So I'll be placing the front pattern on it and then I'll remove 1.5 inch for zip allowance. So my zip allowance is 1.5 inch. So I'll draw a straight line to connect the 1.5 I've just measured on the fold of the back pattern. Okay, so now I'm going to mark the connecting. I'll just connect the hip line, the knee length on the back pattern as well. So now I'll start making my butt curve. So I'll measure from the waist to my underbutt. From waist to my underbutt is 14. So to take this measurement, you have to place it at the back and trace from the waist to the underbutt. So after marking the waist to underbutt, at the waist, I'll go in by 1 inch. At the underbutt line, I'll go in by 1 inch as well. At the knee, I'll go in by 1 inch. And at the full length, I'll go in by 1 inch. So I'm just taking out 1 inch from the waist, the underbutt length, the knee length, and the full length. So next, I'll go to the hip length and then take 2 inches, 2.5 inches above and 2.5 inches below. So I'll mark 2.5 inches above the hip length and mark 2.5 inches below the hip length. And then I'll use a ruler and connect the points together. So I'll be connecting the 1 inch up from the underbutt length to the full length, and then I'll connect from the waist to the 2.5 inches above the hip length, and then connect from the 2.5 inches above the below the hip length to the butt length. So this is to create the butt curve around the back. So after drawing the line, I'm going to pull the front pattern to lie on the 1.5 inch I marked initially, and then I'll start to apply the 1 inch I took out from the underbutt, from the waist, from the knee, and from the full length. So I'm just returning back the 1 inch I took to the back pattern just so that they are still balanced, they are still equal. So I'll draw my 1 inch and then connect this with the ruler and the hip curve ruler. Once I'm happy with the shape, I'll just cut out the shape out. So I've cut out the front and the back, and then I'll cut out the curve at the center back as well. After cutting this out, I'll fold my pattern separately. So I'll be cutting out the lining. So I've taken the main fabric, the front, and then I'll cut out the lining. So the lining is the same. I'm just replicating the same shape, but the difference is the lining is 3 inches shorter than the main fabric. So the lining is 3 inches shorter in length. So I'll cut out the whole shape, and then when I get to the bottom, I'll subtract 3 inches from it. So this 3 inches is what I'll be using to fold the fabric up. Remember, the fabric is going to go up, so the 2 inches allowance is going to go up. So I'm going to use the lining to pull that up. So I'll do this for the front and do this for the back, the back pieces as well. So the two back pieces as well. After I've cut out the lining, I'll cut out the lace now. So for the lace, I'll place the fabric on it, and so it's going to be the same length. I'll just leave like half inch, just the lace trimmings out like this. I'll leave the lace trimmings out like this. By the time I fold it up, I'm going to have like 2 extra inches. So my measurement is going to come up to 62, and then I'll cut it out. If your measurement is, say, if you want to increase your measurement, reduce your measurement. If you don't want that extra 2 inches, you have to take out the 2 inches from your fabric, from the inside fabric. The first one I cut out, you're going to take out the 2 inches measurement. So by the time you place it on your lace, you have an extra 2 inches that meets up with the measurement. So I'm going to cut this out for the front, for the and for the back as well. So I'm going to do the same thing for the front and for the back. So after cutting out my piece, I'm trying to, this is the lace, I'm going to put hemming gum on it, just spread it around it, and then take the fabric, the one that's going to go directly on the lace, and then place it on it and iron it. So I'm just trying to make it one fabric. So I'll do this. I put it all around, place it on it, and iron it. It's better if you have a steam iron will iron it better. So I'll just do this for all the pieces, the front and the back pieces. Just for this brown fabric and the lace, I'll join it, couple it together for to make it one fabric. After ironing all the pieces, I'll trim out all the excess lace so that it sits normal. Can you see how they are attached together? So after attaching it, I'll start sewing from the back piece. So I'll couple the back pieces together to make it one piece with the zip allowance. I'll place them together. Once it's balanced, I'll use a pin to pin it together. And then once I've pinned it all together, I'll measure 1.5 inch from the waist all the way. So following the curve, I'll be measuring 1.5 inch from the waist to the full length. So I'll follow the curve. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be a curve. Just follow the curve. When it gets to the straight part, it will be straight as well. After I've marked my 1.5 inch, I'll take out my zip length. My zip length is going to be 1 inch below the hip length, which is 26, and then I'll take my slit length. So my slit is going to be 2 inches below my hip length, which is 38. So I'll sew from the waist to the zip length with running stitch, and then from the zip length to the slit length I'm going to sew with the tight stitch, normal stitch, and then from the slit length to the full length I'm going to sew with running stitch. So I'll do the same thing for the lining as well. I'll go and sew it running stitch, tight stitch, running stitch. So then I'll iron this open for the main fabric and for the lining. Iron it open, iron it on the front and iron it on the back. So next I'll take the front fabric and then iron it just so I can get my midline, because I'm going to be coupling the front and the back. I just want my midline so that I'll use it to balance on the back line. So I'll place the front on the back and I'll make sure they are balanced together. I'll balance them and then pin it. So I'll be using the midpoint that I just marked to balance it on the joining midline. So when I'm joining this, right, I'd ensure that curve, that hip, that butt curve, that space, I don't stretch it all out when I'm pinning it. I'll just leave a little curve. So it's going to be like there's going to be like a space on it. So you have to ensure that you leave that space on it. Don't stretch it out. If not, it's not going to have allowance for the butt curve. After pinning it and ensuring it's balanced, I'll apply my measurement. So I'll take out my waist length, which is 17 and a half, and then I'll apply my hip length. My hip length is 27, so I'll mark that 27. I'll mark the 2 inches below 27, just what I did when I was cutting. I'll mark the knee length. I'll do that for both sides, both the left and the right side. After marking the nail, and next thing I'm going to do is apply my measurements. So my horizontal measurements are divided by 4. So my round waist. So I apply my round waist. I'll be taking my measurements from the midpoint. So that's midpoint, that line that I measured, that I ironed. so we can see that sharp midpoint. So that's why we have it. So I'll be taking my measurement from the midpoint. Don't forget we had that curve around the waist. So I'll measure around the curve 6.5 on both sides. And then after I've measured the waist, I'll go to the hip length and then measure the round hip. So my round hip, because of that butt curve, we're going to be subtracting quarter an inch from both sides measurement. That means we're subtracting 1 inch from the full hip circumference. So instead of 40, my hip circumference, I'm going to be applying 39. So divided by 4, that's 9 3/4. So we'll just be removing quarter an inch from the quarter measurement of the hip. I'll apply that on the 2 inches below the hip length as well. So the quarter inch we removed is just to take it in at the hip length because of that curve that we have. So don't forget when we were pinning it, I ensured that we see had that curve. We didn't stretch it out. So that is to account for it so that you don't have it bigger than the person's measurement. So I'll mark this. After I mark this, the hip length, I'll go to the knee and mark the knee measurement as well. So my knee measurement, I don't forget I removed subtracted 2. That means the total it's subtracted by I've subtracted 8 from the total hip measurement if I've subtracted 2 from the quarter measurement. So I'm going to measure what my knee rounding, which is 8. I measure 8 on this left side and 8 on the right side, and then I'll go to, after I've measured the knee, I'll go to the full length and measure what I have. So instead of the 6 that I initially measured when I was cutting, I wanted it to be a bit bigger. So I measured 6.5 on the left and 6.5 on the right. So after I've put put my measurements on the hip, the knee, the waist, I'll join it together with the ruler and the hip curve ruler. So after doing this for the main fabric, I'm going to do that for the lining as well. But for the lining, I'm going to add 1 inch to the full measurement just for ease in the lining. So it's going to be just a little bit bigger than the main fabric, 1 inch bigger in the full measurement. So I'll be adding quarter inch to all the measurements for the lining. Don't forget, we're going to be using a straight line to join hip to knee, knee to full length, and then waist to hip. We're going to be using a curve ruler. After drawing my lines, I'll take it to the sewing machine. So this is my main fabric. I'll join it straight. Then when I get to 1.5 inch before the end of this brown fabric, the fabric under the lace, I'll lock it and stop. So at 1.5 inch before the end, I'll lock it. So I won't sew all the way. This is because we're going to sew the main fabric and the lace separately. This is so that we can attach the lining to the brown fabric without affecting the lace. Because we have this trimming at the end, we don't want to fold the lace down. We'll just be folding the main fabric up and the trimming is going to be there. So when we get to the 1.5 inch, we'll lock it. So after I lock it, I will take the fabric out and then lift the brown piece. So I'll just lift it away for the top one and the bottom one. So I'll just lift it and then sew the lace on its own. So I'll lift it, push it up, push the bottom up, make sure it's not in the way, and then continue from where I stopped. So just make sure I'm starting from the right position and then sew from that point to the end of the fabric just to couple the lace. So after I've done that, I'll couple the brown part as well. So at this point you have to be careful so you're not sewing on the brown fabric and you're not sewing away from the line that we started from. So after I've sewn it, this is what it looks like. The lace, I've sewn the lace separate and then the brown 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 fabric. So I've sewn it separately away from the brown fabric and this is what it looks like. So next I'm going to take scissors and notch all the way from that point to where the thread stops on the brown fabric. So I'm going to notch from there all the way to the thread, and then I'm going to join the brown fabric as one. So I'll push the lace in and then take the brown fabric together and then couple it together as one. So I'll just sew that straight from where I stopped initially and then sew it down straight. After sewing it, this is what it looks like. So you can see the bottom, the lace and the brown fabric are separate at the bottom. So the trimming, I would sew the lining on the brown fabric, not on the lace. So the lace is separate on its own. So I've done this for both sides, the two sides. So after doing that, I'll go and iron it open. I'll iron it on the right side, on the right side, the inside, the outside, and then iron the sides as well. I'll do this for the main fabric and for the lining. Now I have both lining and main fabric ready. So it's time to couple the main skirt to the lining. So I'll split the slit open, the slit that I initially sewed on running stitch. I'll split it open for the main fabric and for the lining. After splitting the slit open, I'll take the main fabric, so the brown fabric. I would measure 1.5 inches like I did for the sides, and then use a scissors to notch it. The brown fabric and the lace, I would notch it all the way to the line. So that's iron line, that straight line. I'll notch it all the way to that line, and I'll do this on both sides. So I've notched it. The next thing I'm going to do is attach the lining to the brown fabric. So I'll be starting from the slits and sew it inside. So on the inside of the lining and the inside of the fabric. So I'll just attach it together, sew it together all the way to the other slit. And then after I've sewn it, I'll top stitch it on it all the way to the other side as well. Okay, now it's time to seal. So to seal it, I'm going to sew the slits together. So I'm going to be coupling the left slit and the right slit together. So I'll fold this and take the beginning of the slit. So where I notched the beginning of the slit at 38. So I'll take the lining and then I'll take it on the fabric as well and place them together. And after I've placed them together, just as you see me do here, so I'll take the notched place where the slit stops and take it to the lining and take it to the main fabric and then pin it. So I'll just place it carefully, making sure that notch is on that same part that is notched on the main fabric, and then I'll place it together and then pin it. So after I've pinned it, I'll now pin the rest of it all the way down. So this just ensures that they're starting at the same start point. So don't forget, I marked 38 inches for my slit length for both the lining and the main fabric. So I'm going to pin it from that point all the way down. After I've pinned it down, when I get to the end, so where I split the slit by 1.5 inch, I'm going to push the lace in and then fold it on the fabric. So on the just that one, the rest of it, the one I'll push that in and then sew the rest. So I won't be sewing the lace part on this side. I'm just folding the rest of it up. The lace part is going to be left loose. That's why I pushed it in. So once I push it in, then I'll sew, making sure that I'm not sewing on the lace that I've pushed in, ensuring that it's all the way in, and then I'll sew all the way to where the slit starts and then lock it. So I'll go to the other side and then do that as well again. Pin it, push it in, and then sew. So I'll be using hemming gum to sew. I'll sew on it, hemming gum on it, just so that when I'm folding it in, it's going to sit and look very neat. So I forgot to do that for the other side. So when you're doing that, do it for both sides. So it's going to be very neat. So I'll sew all the way to the beginning of the slit. And then once I'm done, I'll turn it to the right side so you'd see what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. To fold the lace, we'll put hemming gum and then iron it down. So I'll do it for both sides. So the idea of that is just so that it looks neat like this. Just the way you can see, it looks really neat and luxurious. So I'm going to iron both sides. The other side of the slits that I forgot to put hemming gum, I just placed the hemming gum inside by hand and then ironed it just so it will balance. So we need to thoroughly iron these clothes and so that it all look good. I hope this video has been helpful and easy to follow. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post a new video. So after I've finished ironing this, I'll take the lining and the lace on the waist and then pin it together and balance it just so it's ready for the upper parts. Because it's a dress I'll be making, you can also use this method to make a skirt. All you need to do is to seal it closed or make a band to make a skirt. Alright guys, thank you all for watching and see you in my next video.